This page was created to teach Black history. Unfortunately, the American educational system was designed to exclude our real historical account, so we are here to dismantle it. It's time to enlighten those of us who have been kept in the dark. I too was a Black man who didn't know enough about our own history, so I began to dig deeper and do my own research. I want people of all races and cultures to join together to learn our history as one. Here, I will share all of my findings. Please share and support Teaching Black History.
The story of the Edmonson Sisters. The Edmonson Sisters were the daughters of Paul and Amelia Edmonson, a free Black man and an enslaved woman in Montgomery County, Maryland. Mary and Emily were two of 13 or 14 children who survived to adulthood, all of whom were born into slavery. Their father, Paul Edmonson, was set free by his owner's will. Maryland was a state with a high percentage of free Black people. Most descended from enslaved people freed in the first 2 decades after the American Revolution, when enslavers were encouraged to a manumission by the principles of war and activist Quaker and Methodist preachers. By 1810, more than 10% of Black people in the Upper South were free, with most of them in Maryland and Delaware. By 1860, 49.7% of Black people in Maryland were free. Edmonson purchased land in the Norbuck area of Montgomery County, where he farmed and established his family. Amelia was allowed to live with her husband, but continued to work for her master. The couple's children began to work at an early age as servants, laborers, and skilled workers. From about the age of 13 or 14, they were hired out to work in elite private homes in nearby Washington, D.C., under a type of lease agreement where their wages went to the slaveholder. Many enslaved people worked as servants in the homes and hotels of the capital. Men were sometimes hired out as craftsmen, artisans, or to work at the ports on the Potomac River. On April 15, 1848, the schooner Pearl docked at the Washington Wharf. The Edmonson sisters and the 4 of their brothers joined a large group of enslaved people in an attempt to escape on the Pearl to freedom in New Jersey. The escape had been planned by 2 white abolitionists and 2 free Black men. In 1848, free Black people outnumbered enslaved people in the District of Columbia by 3-1. 77 slaves boarded the Pearl at the time. Emily was just 13 years old, and Mary was 15 or 16. The Pearl, with the fugitive hidden among boxes, began its way down the Potomac. It was delayed overnight by the shift in tides and then had to wait out rough weather from its anchor down the bay. In Washington, the alarm was raised in the morning as numerous slaveholders found their enslaved people had escaped. Slaveholders put together an armed posse that went down river on a steamboat and caught up with the Pearl at Point Lookout, Maryland. And the posse seized it, towing the ship and its valuable cargo back to Washington, D.C. When the Pearl arrived in Washington, a mob awaited the ship. The fugitive enslaved people were taken to a local jail. 3 days of riots and disturbances followed as pro-slavery agitators attacked anti-slavery offices and presses in the city in an attempt to suppress the abolitionist movement. Most of the masters of the fugitive enslaved people decided to sell them quickly to slave traders rather than provide another chance to escape. 50 of the enslaved people were transported by train to Baltimore, from where they were sold and transported to the Deep South. In Alexandria, the Edmonson Sisters were hired out to do laundrying, ironing, and sewing, with wages going to the slave traders. They were locked up at night. Paul Edmondson continued his campaign to free his daughters, while their slaveholders demanded $2,250 for their release. Paul Edmondson met Henry Beecher, a young preacher with a church in Brooklyn, New York, who was known to support abolitionists. Beecher's church members raised the funds to purchase the Edmonson Sisters and give them freedom. Mary Edmondson and Emily Edmondson were emancipated on November 4th, 1848. In summer 1850, the Edmonson Sisters attended the Fugitive Slave Law Convention, an anti-slavery meeting in New York organized by local abolitionists Theodore Dwight Weld and others to demonstrate against the Fugitive Slave Act, soon to be passed by the U.S. Congress. Under this act, slave owners had the powers to arrest fugitive slaves in the North. The convention declared all slaves to be prisoners of war and warned the nation of an unavoidable insurrection of slaves unless they were emancipated. At this convention, the sisters were included in a historic photograph which included legendary Frederick Douglass. While there were many slaves whom it was impossible to tell from a white, that Edmonson Sisters' mixed race appearance may have well suited their role as two of the public faces of American slavery. In 1853, the Edmonson Sisters attended the Young Ladies Preparatory School at Oberlin College in Ohio. Since its founding in the 1830s, the school had admitted blacks as well as whites and was a center of abolitionist activism. 6 months after arriving in Oberlin, Mary Edmondson died of tuberculosis. At age 25 in 1860, Emily Edmondson married Larkin Johnson. They returned to the Sandy Spring, Maryland area and lived there for 12 years before moving to Washington, D.C. There they purchased land and became founding members of the Hillsdale community. Edmondson maintained a relationship with fellow Frederick Douglass, and both continued working in the abolitionist movement. Emily Edmondson Johnson died at her home on September 15, 1895.